I'm here with Jana Schuberth, who's currently south of LA in Starbucks, right?
Correct.
So
My
maybe
office of choice often.
Coffees, right?
Yes.
So maybe you can start by just telling us a little bit, a few minutes about who you are and sort of the journey that you've been on. Yes, it's
Yeah.
hard to summarize in just a few minutes, but
It
if you
is a
start
little
with.
bit. Yeah. Well, because it's been such a varied journey, I think the reason why we're speaking mostly is because of those changes that I've made over the past, certainly, I would say 12 years, since leaving school, 12, 13, 14 years since leaving school. So, I'm now in LA as a nomad, or just south of LA for just right now. But in 2 days, I'm going to be in Portland, Oregon, and then I'm going to go somewhere else. So over the course of that last decade, I've created myself a location-independent lifestyle and business, and that was a long haul really to get to this point. But I think to describe a little bit briefly around the story of how professionally I moved in those 10 years or 15 years was really that initially I thought I was going to be a doctor and train as a children's nurse. And I had a contract already set up for becoming a children's nurse in the hospital because my parents were, quite working class, focused on security and a good job, etc. And so they had encouraged both my sister and I to learn a trade initially before going to university. Because in Germany, I grew up in Germany. If you did just go straight to university and then didn't get a job after, you would fall through the social net. Like you wouldn't have social security benefits, etc. So we went into going into a trade, both my sister and I. But instead of becoming a children's nurse, I was poached by a guy really from the stage of a dragon boat festival in my hometown. I used to be very involved in the dragon boat racing scene, which is a Chinese water sport. And he saw me on stage and saw me interact with the people aged 16 to 18. And he was like, you would really fit in well into our PR and advertising company. So I actually went and trained with them to become a PR journalist for the first 2 years of my professional career. And then I moved into a separate business that was really one of my clients at the time, in the leisure industry, to be a marketing manager for them. And then after 6 months only, I was made redundant because they had a takeover and they got rid of all the staff pretty much within a year. I was just the last one in, first one out. And so that put me in a position where I was like at this big choice of like, do I really want to stay in my hometown now or not? And I'd already played with the idea of moving abroad. I'd been traveling a lot with dragon boat racing. And so my eyes were set on Canada originally, but then I met my then boyfriend and future husband, and he had been in France. So we kind of like looked at different places to live and stay and ended up in England in the end. And so when I moved to England, I continued in the marketing direction. I also went to university, did a degree in advertising and marketing communications because I felt like I'd been working in that area for 3 years without really having the theoretical framework. So it was really delightful. I loved that time at university. Studied at De Montfort University in Leicester and had the best of times for sure. And then I came to the end of that and I was like, so I kind of feel like I've been there and done that. And a little bit like you were sharing about Procter and Gamble. I mean, these were the roles we were looking at for sure as marketing graduates. PG, the big sort of consumer brands were absolutely on the top of my list as well. But I was like, I don't know if I want to sell like dog food, if that's what it comes to, or shampoo or whatever. And so one of my early mentors at university was saying, I still think you'd be an amazing accountant. You should just go and like train with one of the big four companies because you'd get such exposure to blue chip companies, small, to large owner managed or even public companies, a breadth of industries. And you could just continue studying. And for me, that really was very attractive because I'm a very happy student. I'm a learn junkie. I love evolving and getting new information. So I was like, this sounds like I would actually be addressing my weaknesses that I perceive to be weaknesses, i.e. Numerical and analytical skills and like just the hardcore business stuff, finance and law and, that kind of stuff that I had kind of stayed as far away as possible in my degree. So I was like, okay, I'm going to challenge myself and I'm going to become an accountant. So I ended up working with I was going to say Procter and Gamble there, with PricewaterhouseCoopers for a couple of years, training to be a CA. And it was really interesting because I loved working for that company. It it made up so much of my identity that when I eventually left there, I was actually asked to leave because I had failed an exam twice, my second to last exam. I was totally at a loss as to who I was without that. It really made me see how much prestige I had borrowed from that company. So it was like, oh, I'm an accountant. I work for one of the big four, and it's like the world's best professional services company, right? Like you get so much, you're being told that you're the creme de la creme all day long inside that company. And so without that, I was really starting to wonder, I didn't like the job. I knew that pretty much straight away. But I loved everything else about it. So I was really starting to investigate a little bit more around why I wasn't really that happy. And so I decided to still continue with my training. I'm not a quitter. Like I was like, I'm going to do this freaking exam a third time if I need to, and I'm going to sit my final, and that's that. And so I did. I just ended up working for a smaller company in the Midlands as well, and finished my training and moved to Experian, which is one big company, blue chip company in data in the UK and globally in Nottingham. And that was really my last real job. And there I had the pleasure of working with a manager who I could be really open with. And although I loved the work that I got into Experian for, like it was mergers and acquisitions work, it was very strategic, number-based work. So it was more communication already, because I kept looking for work that was in finance, but more less with numbers. Like I didn't really enjoy the whole sitting behind spreadsheets and screens all day working on Excel and like balancing balance sheets or like doing cost-based accounting or something like that. For me, that was just horror. So I was looking at like, how can I bring in my people skills, my marketing skills, maybe even language skills, because I speak 4 languages, into my work. And I kept trying to find different ways and projects to do that, but it just didn't never really feel right. And so with her, I sat down, I was like, what would you have done if you hadn't become an accountant? And she's like, oh, I'd have a garden center. I was like, what? So we got talking about, alternative careers. And by that point, I'd hired a life coach for myself, because I was just at a loss. Like I didn't know what my next step should be. I didn't really know what a life coach was, to be fair, but I just had nothing else to lose. Like I was just I always had a plan, of what I wanted next. And there I was, like with my finance background, marketing, and the languages, and I had no clue what my next step should be. And so within that, I really started to fall in love with personal development, started reading a lot of psychological books. I had actually considered doing an MA in psychology after my degree as well. So it was, when I look back, all the common thread is there for me to have loved behavioral studies at uni when I did marketing, and, like always loving psychology, always reading Psychology's magazine, those kinds of things. So it was easy in hindsight, but at the time I was very frustrated with not knowing what I wanted. And so as we talked about more sort of personal development stuff, my coach and I, she's like, well, how about coaching for a career? Like that sounds like your kind of thing, And up until then, I was like, I need a safe job. My boyfriend at the time had his own business, so I didn't want to have another, variable income. And I wanted the pension scheme and all of that, but it just, like, I was living from weekend to weekend. It was not funny. Like, and every Sunday afternoon, I'd be like hitting the blues and go like, oh, do I really have to go? Do I really have to go? Until one day I said, and Andre just said, you don't. Like, if you don't want to go, then don't. And so that really sparked off my journey into self-employment, is what I'm trying to say, and. And I've really not looked back. I mean, it's going to be 5 years in a couple of weeks that I've set up my own business, and I've left the accountancy world. And then even in that last 5 years, a lot has evolved. We know each other through the Alive in Berlin conference, but that wasn't there 5 years ago. The idea was born 4 years ago on a retreat, like with a mentor coach and stuff, where I wanted to have a community, because I felt a little isolated in my industry in England, in the middle of freaking nowhere, because I wasn't living in London like you have before. But so I just felt like I needed to, create some sort of hub for Europe, because I was always looking to the US. I mean, I'm here now, the irony, but I was always looking to the US for speakers, for TED Talk, inspiration, for blogs and books and authors. And I didn't feel like we had the same amount or the same caliber of people in Europe. And so really Alive wanted to become that stage for those kinds of people, both from the US and Europe. And, the majority of the time I've been coaching private clients on behavioral change, initially all about career change, of course, because you start with what you know, and then kind of just deepened into more belief structures and more permanent change around identity and self-love and acceptance. And some consulting work is in that, cultural change, organizational change, but now really the majority of my work is Alive.
And what would you say was the biggest challenge that you faced in making? I mean, you've mentioned quite a few different changes, but I guess the biggest one in terms of really sort of, as you said, starting your own company and moving into a totally different field.
Biggest challenge, I think professionally, the biggest challenge for me was definitely the last 2 years with Alive, because I think I guess the journey for me is associated with a lot of fears. Like, I had to have a lot of coaching on myself from other professionals to overcome my fears. Not do the conference bit is easy, like in my view, but there is so much work involved. And last year I was coaching 55 clients at the same time. I've reduced that to less than probably half this year. But the financial burden is very high. I've invested over 60 grand into making those last 2 years happen personally. And there is just, a huge amount of trust involved. And right now we're expanding into setting up a separate, let's say, so we're expanding, across different revenue streams, and I just have to put up funding and organize funding and really run it like a business and mean it. And I would love to. We have 20 people on my team now, all volunteers. In the first year there was 3. So it's becoming that leader that is very challenging for me, to delegate work, to be effective as a leader, to be inspirational to them, to put the right structures in place, all of those kinds of really practical things. But yes, obviously the legal and financial responsibility that comes with running big conferences and these businesses for real is probably the biggest challenge that I'm still growing from every day right now.
And where did you get the support then that you needed?
I've pretty much always been, like in the past 6 years, I've always had a coach of sorts, or mentors, or several coaches for different things. And of course, I have those people to support me and to help me through just recurring patterns. One of the patterns, for example, that has been very evident is like, either I work really hard in stuff that I don't like and I make a shitload of money, i.e. accounting or consulting, or I do what I really care about and what I love and I'm fucking broke. Excuse my French. So now I'm like working with a coach on, okay, well, how can I do the work that I really love, that is play for me, and make a shitload of money at the same time, right? Like, so
that's the dream we all want to reach, right?
Well, absolutely. But for me, it's not just the because it is very viable, it's very possible, but because I grew up with the belief structure that work has to be hard and making money is difficult and hard and money doesn't grow on trees and all those things, like that's what I need to address, right? So I have people that I work with there. But other than that, I probably feel the most support from people that I really care about, my family, my sister, my friends that are, having my back, the people that come to speak at Alive, that are investing their own time, not being paid, coming to Europe. That really, and the Live community, like you look at them, or whenever I feel like I don't know why I'm doing this anymore, I just watch the video from last year online and I go like, yeah, that's why I'm doing it, because it's meaningful to me.
And what would you say is the best part of your lifestyle now?
Instantly comes to mind skydiving.
Yes, of course.
So I love what other people pay in rent and cars and gas and all of that kind of stuff. I pay in flights and skydiving. I love just having a suitcase and a backpack. And although some days I want to have my own little home, of sorts, where I can put my head to rest, I also learned to be very, very comfortable with very unusual or uncertain circumstances. So that was a big, big growth for me over the last year, being nomadic. Getting used to life in Kenya, getting used to life in Bali, getting used to life in Finland, Switzerland, wherever else I traveled, in the US as well, with very, very little means, both financially as well as physically. So I feel a deep sense though of freedom to literally just pack up and go any day. And so it's a very, very strong lifestyle by choice. I choose to be here right now, and then I choose to be somewhere else in 2 days, and then I want to do something else. Like, it's very, very freeing. So yeah, I think that is the best part. And I get to meet a lot of amazing people and visit great places. And obviously, as you may know, have fallen very much in love with Hawaii. So I get to spend great times in really beautiful places. What's better than that?
And finally, if you could give one piece of advice to somebody who perhaps was in your situation 6 years ago, considering a change that maybe sort of the fears are weighing heavier than the desire to change, what would that advice be?
Yeah, I think so. A couple of things come to mind. I think a lot of people are waiting for the big passion to knock on their door. I'm sorry about the background noise. It's kids playing, and I'm at Starbucks. So, so people think that passion is just going to show up on their doorstep one day, and then they'll use that passion to make big money. And I don't agree with that. I think passion is something that develops over time. You can have curiosity, and you can have an inkling of what you like in the present moment. And the more you follow that every single day, the more it will lead to passion. But I think it's wrong to wait for the perfect thing that feels like that's it. Sometimes we just have to follow hunches, And I think that's sort of the second part of that piece of advice, is to just be really in tune and almost become like a scientist in your own life of all the things that you don't want to miss out on, like the documentaries that you keep watching, the blogs that you keep reading, because they are a thread of information, right, of what it is you really want and care about. And sometimes it's better even to ask, like, what really bothers you, because if you can solve a problem that several people have, chances are that's going to get you some income, right? And so, yeah, I think the main piece is really to follow your curiosity, I think is how I put it.
What's the next big thing for you then? What are you working on at the moment?
Well, the next big thing for sure is setting up a Live Events USA for Hawaii next year. And we're really looking at expanding into different sources of revenue, like online products and services, and some retreats, workshop-y type things, so that we can actually create a sustainable business. And my goal is to grow it quite significantly over the next 5 years in order to be able to employ people, etc., and also take a salary, because at the moment all I've been doing is putting money into it rather than take any money out of it. And the other thing that I'm really invested in right now is day trading. So I'm learning to day trade foreign exchange currencies. So that's going to be playing a big part for me over the next 6 months for sure as well.
So still using your finance skills and experience.
I am, and I'm not really, because trading is very different to accounting and finance as to what you do there. But again, it's very psychology based, and that I'm really interested in, and obviously it supports my journey around money. So my core themes that I work on for myself right now are sort of intimacy and relationship stuff. Like, I study a lot of polarity, and I coach a lot on polarity type work with couples or with individuals on their relationships and sex lives. So that's one area that really intrigues me, and the other is sort of the finance and money world that I want to really just become really badass at.
That's a good goal to have. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I mean, I've loved following you as well from the last few months, of going from sort of watching interviews of you in the past to meeting you at Berlin and to seeing the continued choices that you're making. So thank you very much.
Thank you for doing that. It's a pleasure, and it's great to connect, and I'm honored to be part of your blog.